You're on a journey through the Bible to experience the epic story of God and to learn your part to play in the unfolding drama. Prepare for your role as you learn your history, your enemy, and your king. Welcome to the Bible Brief. Join us today as we see the conclusion of the story of Esther. We'll see that the hidden God leaves fingerprints in every event and every detail. You're listening to the Bible Brief. The Jews are in trouble. The evil Haman, the enemy of the Jews, has convinced the king of Persia, Ahasuerus, to issue a decree allowing the Jews to be slaughtered in the coming months. All throughout Persia, the Jews mourn the coming catastrophe, and in the city of Susa, the beautiful Queen Esther, the secret Jewess, is preparing to approach King Ahasuerus. She will go into his presence unsummoned and risk death in the process. 3 days ago, she said to Mordecai, "Go and assemble all the Jews who can be found in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my maidens will fast as you do. After that, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." These are the words of faith. Though God is hidden throughout the book of Esther, we yet see faithful actions of both Esther and Mordecai. In the midst of mourning over their apparent fates, Mordecai knows that deliverance will arise for the Jews. He has an unspoken faith in God, providing salvation, whether it's through Esther or through some other means. And Esther, resigned to fulfill what appears to be her purpose and rising to be queen of Persia, resolves to risk death to save her people. All along the story, we're asking, does God's hiddenness mean that he will forsake his people? It's been 3 days, and the fast is over. Today is the day, a day that could bring death to the queen. You can imagine the young Esther's heart pounding, her hands shaking as she puts on her makeup. Perhaps a sense of coldness, as if death were already declaring victory over the day. And yet, as she slowly approaches the throne room, a burst of love and courage flowing from her dedication to her people. Death might desire victory, but Esther wouldn't yield to cowardice. She would approach the king with courage. Soon the doors open, and her eyes immediately meet Ahasuerus. He sees what she's doing, and his calculating demeanor is disarmed by his beautiful queen. As soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she found favor in his sight, and the king extended the golden scepter in his hand toward Esther, and she approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Death, it seems, will have to wait for the queen. Her courage was met with the king's kindness, a king bewildered at this great risk that his queen has just taken. So with great beneficence, he says, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you." "If it pleases the king," Esther replied, "may the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for them." "Hurry," commanded the king, "and bring Haman, so that we can do as Esther has requested." So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And as they drank their wine, the king said to Esther, "What is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be fulfilled." Esther replied, "This is my petition and my request. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, may the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet that I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question." Oddly enough, Esther doesn't immediately make known her desire to the king. And oddly enough, she doesn't later at the feast, even when the king asks what she wants. And even more oddly, she invites Haman to be part of this extended ordeal. Esther is cooking up something, and it's not just a banquet. Later that evening, Haman is ecstatic. He had just enjoyed the most exclusive meal in the kingdom as the sole guest of the king and queen. Life couldn't get much better. Well, except for that Mordecai who wouldn't give him any respect. Haman says this to his wife, Queen Esther invited no one but me to join the king at the banquet she prepared, and I'm invited back tomorrow along with the king. Yet none of this satisfies me as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate." His wife Zeresh and all his friends told him, "Have them build a gallows 50 cubits high, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go to the banquet with the king and enjoy yourself." The advice pleased Haman, and he had the gallows constructed. Esther may have evaded death, but Mordecai is its next target. Well, he would be next, were it not for the sleepless night of the curious king. Later that night, the king is apparently anxious to know the request of Esther, and he can't sleep despite his best efforts. And funny enough, to try to sleep, he has someone get out the history of the Persian Empire. Surely, he thought, having a history book read aloud would invite sleep like nothing else would. But soon, in these historical chronicles, his servants begin reading about how Mordecai the Jew saved the king from an assassination attempt. Realizing the great favor of Mordecai, the king says, "What honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this act?" "Nothing has been done for him," replied the king's attendants. "Who is in the court?" the king asked. Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to ask the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows he had prepared for him. So the king's attendants answered him, "Haman is there, standing in the court." "Bring him in," ordered the king. Haman entered, and the king asked him, "What should be done for the man whom the king is delighted to honor?" Now Haman thought to himself, "Whom would the king be delighted to honor more than me?" And Haman told the king, "For the man whom the king is delighted to honor, have them bring a royal robe that the king himself has worn, and a horse on which the king himself has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Let the robe and the horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them array the man the king wants to honor, and parade him on a horse through the city square, proclaiming before him, 'This is what is done for the man whom the king is delighted to honor.'" "Hurry," said the king to Haman, "and do just as you proposed. Take the robe and the horse to Mordecai the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have suggested." So Haman took the robe and the horse, arrayed Mordecai, and paraded him through the city square, crying out before him, "This is what is done for the man whom the king is delighted to honor." This is the turn in the story. What looks inevitable and unchangeable is changed in an instant. Mordecai goes from fated to the gallows to highly honored by the king. The contrast of outcomes is stark, and Haman's wife senses the turn of events too, later saying to her husband, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has begun, is Jewish, you will not prevail against him, for surely you will fall before him." Surely Haman wasn't encouraged by his wife's comment, no doubt trembling at the thought of his own demise. After a sleepless night, the king again goes through the next day with bated breath, just waiting for Esther's feast in the evening. Mordecai is honored, and Haman's hatred surely blossoms toward the Jew on the king's horse. But finally, after waiting the whole day, Ahasuerus and Haman are at the table before Queen Esther. The king asks again, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be fulfilled." Queen Esther replied, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, grant me my life as my petition, and the lives of my people as my request. For my people and I have been sold out to destruction, death, and annihilation. If we had been merely sold as men servants and maidservants, I would have remained silent, because no such distress would justify burdening the king." Then King Ahasuerus spoke up and asked Queen Esther, "Who is this, and where is the one who would devise such a scheme?" And Esther replied, "The adversary and enemy is this wicked man, Haman." After this reveal, Haman's life is measured in minutes. He begs for his life in vain, and soon Haman is hanged on the very gallows that he had built for Mordecai. Haman's reversal was the opposite of Mordecai's. Haman went from highly honored to hanged on the gallows. Yet a significant problem remained. The problem remained. The villain was destroyed, but the decree was irrevocable. How will the Jews be saved from slaughter? Well, Mordecai, with the blessing of the king, launches a plan involving a second decree. To the Jews, it gave in each and every city the right to assemble and to defend themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province hostile to them, including women and children, and to plunder their possessions. Soon, couriers rode out in haste on their royal horses, pressed on by the command of the king, and the edict was also issued in the citadel of Susa. Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal garments of blue and white, with a large gold crown and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. For the Jews it was a time of light and gladness, of joy and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the king's edict and decree reached, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many of the people of the land themselves became Jews, because the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. Finally, we come to see the culminating reversal of the story. When those days came, the Jews were able to defend themselves instead of being killed by those who hated them. An apparent death sentence gave way to life and victory for the Jewish people. The Jews even instituted a feast to celebrate that the Jews gained rest from their enemies, and the month in which their sorrow turned to joy, and their mourning into a holiday. Mordecai wrote that these were to be days of feasting and joy, of sending gifts to one another and to the poor. The feast to celebrate this event is called Purim, after the Persian word pur, meaning to cast lots. This is an odd name for such a momentous event. After all, to cast pur, or to cast lots, was a Persian religious practice where the Persians superstitiously tried to understand the favorability or unfavorability of days based upon apparent chance. Think of something like rolling dice, and if they land on 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, it's an unfavorable day. But if it's a 6, it's a favorable day. The Persians did this to try to figure out when to take risks and when to complete tasks. Haman himself had done this initially to determine the day on which he would try to get the king's permission to annihilate the Jews. He cast lots, or cast pur, and finally determined it to be a favorable day. Well, the Jews had a method of casting lots too, but theirs was to determine the will of God amidst uncertainty, rather than to superstitiously understand the days. In fact, earlier in their history, wise Solomon had written this proverb. He said, "The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord." For the Persians, lot casting was a faithless task. For the Jews, however, it had been a faithful way to understand God's will. This encompasses the great reversal of the book of Esther. This God who is so hidden through the book is the same God who gave beauty to Esther to be chosen as queen, who gave opportunity to Mordecai to save the king from assassination, who kept the king from sleeping on his sleepless night, who elevated Mordecai to honor, and who saved the Jews through the courageous Esther. This was the same God who made Haman's apparent success in casting pur lead to his downfall before Esther and Mordecai. God may be hidden, but God's hiddenness is not his absence. His fingerprints are all over the story of Esther and the story of the salvation of the Jews. Just as he had made the sea part for the Israelites in the Exodus, showing himself in the pillar of cloud and fire, so also he works behind the curtain, in the shadows, behind the scenes, even in the casting of pur. Even in such a seemingly small act of rolling some dice, God will not forget his promises, and he will not forget his people. Even when God is hiding, he's working. Join us next time as we wrap up the Hebrew Bible. This God who was hidden in the book of Esther is about to show himself in a way like he never has before. The long-awaited king is set to arrive.
For Bible readings, reflection questions, and quizzes, don't miss the Bible Brief app. Available on iOS and Android so you can go deeper into the story. The Bible Brief is a project of the Bible Literacy Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping you learn the Bible. Give to support the Bible Brief by visiting BibleBrief.org or tap the Give link in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the Bible Literacy Foundation.